There's some seats up front. Come on. There are a few seats up front.
There's 2 chairs right here. Another 3 chairs right here. One room here and one right here. Another one right here. There's seats for everyone.
we got a full agenda and a full house and a lot of stuff to cover. So let's get started. First, Tanisha, where are you? All right, I'm gonna ask Tanisha Nash-Laird, who is the new executive, if y'all have not met her, at the Arts Council of Princeton, to come and bring you greetings on behalf of her staff and her building. And thank you for hosting us this evening.
Yes, I'm the executive director, but for this, John has been the boss. So I just do whatever he tells me. So he told me to welcome you, so I am. Again, my name is Tanisha Nash-Laird, and I'm in my month, I guess, 7, going at 8, here as the new executive director, which is kind of the thrill of my life. Thank you so much for filling the room here, to coming to see this presentation. I'm really excited about everything that's happening here, and I know the staff is. I do want to acknowledge everyone on staff that has worked so hard to make this presentation for you go really smoothly, including Melissa, who is in the booth up there. So thank you, Melissa Cuskin, for all of the things that you do. Before this, I was going around, I want you to know, John, and introducing myself to people, and I was saying, don't let this be the only time that you step your foot into the Paul Robeson Center for the Arts. I do hope that I get to see you all again here in the future. So again, on behalf of all of the staff, as well as board, I think there's some board members that are still here. Thank you so much for coming in. It's absolutely our pleasure to host the joint effort Safe Streets Summer Project. Thank you.
There are a couple people that I need to sort of just acknowledge. One, our city administrator, Mark DeShields, is here this evening. Mark. Our city councilman, Tim Quinn, is here this evening. Tim, thank you for coming. I'm not sure if Lance made it here as of yet, but where's Lance? Shirley? All right. No, but there's David Cohen, who's also running for town council here. And I think Bernie Miller is here. Bernie's retiring, so let's let him know how much we appreciate all the work he's done over these years. I think Letitia Fraga is here also. Letitia, good to see you. I think I saw my councilman just walk in. Lance. Okay. Also, for those of y'all who don't know, our good friend Tommy Parker has moved from being head of the union at the university and is now a campaign manager for the two folks who are running for city council. So, T, good job. You know, I saw this morning, so let me just get right into it. I got up about 7 this morning in preparation for this gathering. I finished the last couple pages of the book, so I would not be delinquent. But I drove through the community, just slow ride through the community. Looked at houses and reflected on people and individuals and personalities that were here when I grew up. Then I stopped right where Signorino's used to be, across from the Broadway house, for a minute. And I reflected on a picture that Romus had given me the other day of Yana Mae and Pete and Rick. And then I thought about the fact that even though the house is not there, there's a more modern house there where I used to live. I remember being next to the Broadway, across from the Broadway house, but next to Floyd Fox's house. And I remember coming outside, and Floyd and John Broadway, these are two of my heroes in the town who are still with us. Floyd is in Kansas now, but John is here. But these guys taught me sports, you know, they taught me responsibility, but they didn't necessarily live in the same house that I did. They led by example. They showed me what things were by example. And so I have a great love affair and I say this oftentimes, with the folks in this community. Because y'all are really the thumbprint that has a lot to do with who I think I am. I'm still unraveling that and still trying to bring some closure to that. And hopefully I can do that before St. Peter's calls me and asks, what did you do in the life of a child? But I know where I'm going, and I know who's going to be asking me what I did because I know what I've done in the life of young people. But there's a young man who all of us looked up to when we were coming up because he rode motorcycles and he had been in the military and he was John's younger brother. And we all thought Romus was the bomb. We all thought he was the bomb. And I can remember many a day him coming and saying, Bailey, let me talk to you. And so we developed a bromance based on a younger brother thinking that, an older brother thinking that a younger brother could be about something, and identified the fact that he was going to put something into him. So the other day I went by the house. He said, John, I need to talk to you. And when Romus, like Shirley and John and some others, when they call, you listen, or I listen. You know, I stop what I'm doing and I try to figure out what it is that they're calling for and see how I can respond. And Romus said, you know, it's been a long time since I've come to one of these, and you've been bugging me for years to come. And so I need to seize the moment, John, because there are a couple of things I need to say. So usually I have Shirley do the historical deal, right? So today I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to ask Romus to reflect, to recall on not only some of the pictures, but also his sensibility about community. Because if you see the collages out there, you can see you can see somebody you know, you can see families and friends and church members and sorority brothers and sisters. So it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So Romus, please bless us with your comments and your thoughts about our community. He asked for 25 minutes. I told him he had 5. And so, you know, Brother Broadway, the time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I want to start out with a line from one of the black poets. It's hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is like a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. The John Witherspoon neighborhood of Princeton at one time consisted primarily of Italian Americans, African Americans, and Irish Americans. They brought to Princeton with them a dream. That dream was to create a better life for them, with the family accompanying their arrival, and the family that was to be. Johnny was one of those. The newcomers to Princeton engaged in whatever income employment available. They gave honor and dignity to labor that was looked down upon. They resided in available housing. As a matter of fact, the only housing available to these immigrants was in the John Witherspoon neighborhood. But they came with a dream. There's the daydream, there's the night dream. The night dream is what you wish for. The daydream is what you work for. So when you saw all these people walking back and forth, the Italians, the Irish, and the Africans, they were going to work on feet, long hours, low pay, but they were pursuing that dream. Also, the store was pretty busy at that time too. As a matter of fact, it was working overtime because there were a lot of newborns came in after newcomers settled in. But let me take the life of one person out of the community. You can follow this person. You can find out how persons follow their dreams. This man came to Princeton from far south of here. Matter of fact, he came from a state that was next door to hell. That was South Carolina. Georgia was next door. If you were black, you knew what hell was if you lived in Georgia. This man came to Princeton, found several jobs, had a wife, and had children. He had dreams for his children. His firstborn graduated from Witherspoon School for the Colored, and then Princeton High School with high honors, and then from Princeton University with honors. From there, he went to Harvard Medical School, from there to the Navy and the Medical Corps. Results that parents put forth for their children to the achievements and the heights that they rose to. So this is what Princeton was about. This is what the John Witherspoon community was not just a community with people thrown in. People were here, but they thrived. They followed their dreams, and they had to have tremendous discipline because they couldn't have done what they did without the discipline that they exhibited. So look at the collages, ask about who are they, where did they come from, how did they get here, why, and what happened to the children. Thank you, John.
I don't know if y'all heard John Broadway over there. He said, "That's my brother." That's my brother. Here you go, Rose. All the people who are up here took part in the research that Kitsy Waterson did. And I need to, before we bring Shirley up to introduce our speaker, I said this to Joan, I said it to a couple other folks. When you read the book, it gives you a different perspective on the people that you thought you knew. It gave me a much different perspective on the Floyds, on the Wells, on Joan Hill, on Lois Craig. I mean, I followed Mildred because, you know, she was my mayor. So I knew her history and I knew the story. But some of you have a broad, varied, distinguished, and distinct story. I mean, I acknowledged some of the folks before, but, you know, Jim Floyd was the first mayor here. Mildred was the first black woman mayor. But a little sister who grew up right around the corner here was also a mayor in this town, and she was the second mayor in this town. That was Yana Moore. So we've had folks do good things in this community. And Romus is right. He didn't get down to the number of doctors, the number of lawyers, the number of athletes. I mean, when he gets you by himself, it just runs it down to you, all the folks who came up out of here. But he's right, they all worked. They all worked so that somebody that came after them could do a much better job. Kitsy captured the stories, the voices of many of those folks in this community. And so her work is critical to the types of things that Shirley and the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society are doing, to the types of things that the folks at the Robeson House are doing. But it's also a challenge to the library to do more, to the school district to do more, for the university to stand up and be counted because they've done some things that heretofore could be viewed as dismissive, if not out and outright racist. So rather than put that thumbprint on them, we're just going to confront, without being mean-spirited, those issues that dismiss us, those issues that abuse us, those issues that try to act like we did not come this way. Because if you take history and you hyphenate it, it's his story. All right? Whoever wrote history wrote it in their image. And so it's now time for us to rewrite the Black American story. So given the opportunity, on Friday night, up at the church, we're going to recognize some folks who are the Witherspoon Jackson Citizens of the Year. But in addition, I know y'all tired of hearing me talk, but I'm going to speak to the fact that our ancestors are talking to me and through me to us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to be black in America here, because some of us have forgotten. And I think it's important now to see it, that we stand up, we become and continue to be counted, because there are so many folks who come by here and put their thumbprint on this community. And if you look at this Robeson photo, look closely at it. He's looking at us. He's telling us we better not mess this up, because you don't get too many chances or a second chance to make a first impression. We got a second chance here. And so I would like to see us step up and challenge ourselves to do more and be more. And that's going to be a consistent theme through the rest of this week. Shirley, would you please come forward and introduce our speaker for this evening? Shirley Satterfield from the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society.
Thank you, John. Let's get this microphone together. I'd like to introduce Kitsy Waterson. I was told to say something about the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, but I'll go on and introduce Kitsy since John had said something. But I would, first of all, like to introduce those who made it possible for us to be the 20th Historic District. And we became the 20th Historic District after a whole year of meeting with the council, meeting in my home so that we could make it the 20th Historic District. Actually, it should have been the first Historic District because our families did everything in this town. But I would like to acknowledge thank you. I would like to acknowledge those 9 people who spent laborious times meeting and going in front of the Borough Council, not the Borough Council, it's Princeton now, the Princeton Council. And if you're here, if you would just stand up to be acknowledged. Bernadine Hines, Yaina Moore, Leighton Newland. You call him Tommy, I call him Thomas. Thomas Parker. Jacqueline Swain. And those Princeton residents who gave their time and expertise to work with us. Kip Cherry. There's Kip back there. Daniel Harris. John Heiler. Because of our 20th Historic District status, John Bailey and I partnered to start what is now the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society. The mission, the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, founded in 2016, is an organization dedicated to the appreciation, understanding, and preservation of the rich and proud history of African American people in Princeton. Now let's get to the important part. You ready, Kitsy? Okay. The presence of colored, Negro, Black, African Americans in Princeton dates back to the 1700s when colored people worked as slaves on large farms and in homes as agricultural and domestic servants. Many were slaves to the early presidents of the College of New Jersey, Princeton University. By the early 1800s, there were free colored residents who were descendants of slaves, and later years, many families migrated to Princeton from the South to find employment. There are 2 references that are now used to refer to the growing population in Princeton: sustainable and walkable. Our ancestors and African American residents who are now in their 70s, 80s, and 90s have been sustaining this town for 4 centuries. Cleaning houses, washing, ironing, taking care of children for wealthy Princeton, serving as maids, butlers, cooks, waiters, bartenders at the Nassau Inn, the Nassau Club, the Peacock Inn, Princeton University clubs and facilities. And all were establishments that refused to welcome us as patrons. Not only did we sustain this town, we walked everywhere. For years, books, articles of university research papers have been written about African Americans in Princeton, but none has been written as well as Kitsy Waterson's book. In 1998, I met Kitsy. She was professor at Princeton University. There were many times when she came to my home to talk with my mother and me. Eventually met Hank Pennell, Clyde Buster Thomas, Penny Edwards Carter, and Mr. Albert Hines. She told us that she and her students were interested in capturing the oral history of generations of African Americans in Princeton, New Jersey. My first reaction was, oh, here we go again, another research paper. To the contrary, Kitsy was the only professor who became a genuine friend with interest only to document the true feelings, sorrows, joys, struggles, contributions of our families, written in first person. When I read the testimonies of our ancestors and families and remember the title, I Hear My People Singing, it takes me to her favorite hymns while sitting on the porch resting from a long day's work. On the hot day, she would be fanning and sipping a tall glass of minted iced tea. Many residents here today can remember similar moments of their families' lives. For years, Henry Pennell has captured the history of many residents in our community through oral interviews. Romus Broadway has given us a pictorial history through his collages of our families through the years, and I researched and give the written history and walking tours of Witherspoon Jackson community and African American life in Princeton. After almost 20 years with dedication and determination, Kitsy has captured all three mediums by giving us the memories of the love, sweat, faith, and strength of the folks who lived in the Witherspoon Jackson community and who survived, contributed, and prospered in a segregated Princeton. Kitsy, I extend our sincere gratitude to you for honoring the proud and never to be forgotten African Americans in Princeton. Now, if I may mention something else, Kitsy has another thing that she does. Throughout the years, Kitsy has invited me to come to Philadelphia to hear her band. Other than being a great artist and writer, she is a musician, and she plays some mean drums. Kitsy.
How's that? Everybody here? Actually, that's okay, so I can, whoop. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, John. Thank you for all coming and being here. Shirley makes it sound like I was pretty organized at the beginning, but I wasn't. And you give me a lot of credit. Actually, what happened at the very beginning of this, what now turns out to be a book, I visited with Hank Pennell and Buster Thomas to ask them if they'd help me figure out any good places for my students to volunteer, because I'd started community-based learning initiative, and I wanted my kids to learn about, these are freshmen mainly and some sophomores at Princeton, and I wanted them to learn more about racism and poverty than just have an idea. I wanted them to be working in homeless shelters and soup kitchens and various things. And so I heard about the Clay Street Learning Center, and that's really all I knew about the neighborhood. And so I asked Hank and Buster what they'd recommend if there were other places my students could be of service. And so we talked a while, and some of you heard this when you were at the library, but Hank looked at me and he said, Kitsy, your poverty program sounds really good, but what we want here is an oral history. We want these stories gotten before it's too late. And if these stories aren't heard now, they'll never be heard. They won't exist, because they won't be anywhere that people can find them. And he said, and of course at that point my mind was just like, my hair was on fire. I love stories and I'm passionate about justice and equal rights. And Hank didn't know all my background, but he caught me right at that moment. And then he hooked me and pulled me in with, and right now there's a 98-year-old man in this neighborhood whose stories you won't believe, and there are so many of them, and they've got to be had. And that was Albert Hines. So 2 weeks later, I was at the Clay Street Learning Center, and Buster was setting up equipment, and Hank was videotaping. He had a backdrop, and I was nervous. I wasn't used to, I'd been a newspaper reporter in the 70s, but I wasn't used to interviewing people being filmed while it was happening. And so I was like, do you think this will make Mr. Hines nervous? And of course, Mr. Hines, 3.5 hours later, said, boy, this was great. He said, I wished I'd interviewed my own parents. And right now, I just want to say to everybody here, if you haven't interviewed your parents and they're still alive, or your grandparents, do it. Because they have stories. You know we have so many things that we think we know, but there's so much that's unknown. And it's so easy to stay in the realm of what we know and not go into the unknown, not go into those places between us and among us that are so real and so alive, even if they're not seen. Such as racism, such as how it feels, how the degradation of racism feels every day. And but when I started this project, I just got so important to me to make this Hank's Dream and Buster's, and then Penny Edwards Carter and Shirley, to get these stories became paramount. But I didn't know how to do it. I was, you're called a professor if you teach at the university, but I was actually a lecturer, and those of us who are lecturers are usually work full-time and paid part-time. Some of you know that reality. But so I didn't have assistants or anything, but I was teaching a course that fall after I interviewed Mr. Hines called Finding Voice, Perspectives on Race and Class. And I thought, well, these kids, if I could get 14 of them to do an interview each, then we'd have 14 more interviews. We'd have 15 altogether. So we did that, and that's really how this got rolling. And when I was thinking about talking tonight, I was thinking about how the process of this becoming a book was such a kind of a jagged path. And books, when they get done, it seems like, it was always that way. But just recently, I've realized what this book is, and I've realized it from what other people have said. And of course, just working on it so hard, you just start trying to get it right. But a number of people have said to me, this story isn't known. Most of us are taught that slavery was in the South. And this is a story of slavery, human bondage, segregation, and racial injustice in the North. And it all happened here. And what I realized is that story after story, it just kept building. And, when you start talking to people about how your family got here, or how you got here, there's so many different things, but they all lead back to slavery, which was kind of the contamination that came down on all of us all through these centuries, and came down obviously on African Americans so brutally. And so I fell in love with Mr. Hines, and of course I fell in love with Hank and Buster and Penny and Shirley and Alice Satterfield. I called my East Coast mama. She just was a dream of a person. And if you read the book, read about how during the war, when all the men were gone, Alice said, I had to learn how to do things myself. So the iron wasn't working, I took apart the iron. And as I took it apart, I laid every piece down. And when I got done, I looked at where they were, and then I put it all back together, and it worked. And she figured out how to wire, how to do electricity. And all through these stories, there is so much strength and so much humanity and so much kindness and so much beauty. It's just, I think that one of the things that's happening is not only are people learning about racism from this book. White people have a lot to learn, and we all have a lot to learn. But I think the experience of racism is something so often people think of homelessness, poverty, hunger, all these things as an idea, not as an actual lived experience. And history, as we've learned it, is so often an intellectual idea. But the fact is, it's based on the real history is the real living of it. And that's what the people of the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood have done in sharing their stories and bringing their stories and allowing their stories to be heard by others. And there's just such beauty in that. And the building of institutions, of organizations, the creation of a community that loved and took care of their children and made them safe. So many people said, they never knew what was going on because they were protected by their parents. Remember Buster Thomas talking about hearing about lynchings, but it was always a whispered conversation. And he wanted to know what it was. It was, and then he talked about how he started finding out that information. So there's so many stories here. And I guess I never would have guessed when we started that this book would end up telling this story about slavery and segregation and injustice in the North. So it's kind of exciting that it's gone that deep and that it has that much to teach us. I was trying to think today earlier, a couple of days ago, about how to organize my talk. And I heard more on the news, and I'm not going to even say the name of the main destroyer in office. But I can't, it just makes me sick. And I guess I heard the Civil Rights Commission was going to be trying to attack affirmative action. And one of the things that's been so clear to me from the time I started working as a newspaper reporter in the 70s is that Black excellence is such a threat to white supremacy. And there are these, you make a leap forward in any area, and then there's, it's like that seems to be happening all over again. The attacks are so vicious. And so I thought I'd look in the book for some inspiration and see what quotes I wanted to use. And I was going to get somebody to read them, but I guess I want to tell you what happened to me as I started reading from the back of the book. I started reading some quotes, and I just kept reading them, and I thought, this is what we need. This is what we need to hear. And I wanted to read you some of those things that I read, and then I'll end with a story about Reverend Robeson, and then we will have our panelists kind of give some responses or thoughts of their own. Just a second here. Pardon me. I wrote down, 291. Sorry. Okay, this just happens to start with a quote from Joan Hill. And there are more things by everybody in here that I would like to read too, but this is just the lineup that I read, and it just happened that they were in order, but I want you to know how relevant it is to our life today. Joan Hill. I think that if by some miracle Martin Luther King just happened to come back to life, he would be very, very saddened by the current state of affairs. I think it is a sin and a shame the things that they have done to our black men because one race is afraid of them. I think trying to stop affirmative action is terrible. I don't mean giving anyone things that they don't deserve. We work for it. I think that it is unfortunate that black people, people of color, still have to work extra hard to get ahead in today's society. When we were coming up, we helped one another. Now it's the haves and the have-nots, and the haves don't care about the have-nots. I see a lot of adults not liking what the kids do. The kids do the same things that we did, and we have to appreciate that the kids do, but guide them also. Don't stop them from having visions and the ideas they all have. Each era has their likes and dislikes, and we need to work together to help each other. We really do. Hey, Joe Moore. I think for every black person, whether they shovel the snow or whether they're a professor laureate or Toni Morrison, the question is whether or not you can make a legitimate contribution to your society and for that contribution to be accepted as a legitimate bona fide contribution. I can read anybody who's black and the same question emerges. How do you penetrate the white psyche to say that we can make a contribution to the society which we are a part of? The whole essence of being human is to pass through this life contributing. We have to have the ability to penetrate racism and say that we can make contributions. We have made contributions. That's an understatement. And that's all I was about on a little parochial, provincial level in a little small town called Princeton. And here's Florence Twyman, who died in 2001. My first husband, Walter Harris, we married in 1936, and we moved to John Street. He was a policeman, but to supplement his income, he also worked at the eating clubs as a houseman. He was the first black policeman killed on duty. He joined in the 1940s and was killed in 1946. He wasn't on that long and was treated pretty well, but then he had grown up here and it made a difference in those days. It was a different time then. They knew that blacks would stay in their place. But now, after civil rights, they're worried because blacks are getting, I'll use it, uppity. Now we have racial profiling and all, but it's nothing new. It always stayed in the closet. You know, nothing just starts. It's always been there. And then later she says, nothing really changes, it just looks different. The schools are almost segregated again now because the whites move out. You know, the community park school is a controversy. You hate to go around thinking you have to keep your guard up, fists up. Do you sit there and defy them or what? It's hard to know. Okay, this is Joe Moore again. I would like to be optimistic for my daughter and my son and my grandkids and for Hank Pinnell's grandkids and his sons, but I'm not really optimistic. I don't know how to put this, but you wake up and the difference between you being born white and me being born black, it's evolution, you know. It's a quirk that is going to make our experience dramatically different. We're made of the same particles except for the color of our skin. And then having to live a life of penalization for that? Okay. And this is Johnny Dennis, who was nearing 100 when she was interviewed. He's one of my favorites in this book. I never wished I was in the world better than anybody else. You know, so many people think they are better than you. They want to change you. But you can't change if God made you. You're not just sitting in a corner like a cat. you don't sit around in one little place. You see them people walking on Nassau Street, passing each other, use the same table, drink the same water.